everybody, Mestre Sukudi coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. Today I have a very special guest, a friend of mine, Mestre Galego, author, long-term capoeirista, mestre, and author of Playing in the Light, a book that I've read and I found very interesting and many similarities between my book, The Path of Capoeira, and his book, The Playing in the Light. Mestre Galego, welcome to my podcast here on Mestre Vibes.
Hello, Mestre. Thanks for having me.
I guess we could just jump right into it. And I try to keep the podcast a little bit about 30 minutes because people have work days and whatnot. But if it becomes more awesome, then we can always break it up into two. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got introduced to capoeira, and what you're currently doing with capoeira.
Okay, well, that's a long story. To know the whole story, you're gonna have to read my book. But but the short answer is I first discovered capoeira when I was 18 years old, and I didn't start training right away because I just was exposed to one class. But as soon as I saw it, I think I fell in love right away, and it just really stuck in the back of my head. And in the meantime, I was traveling around and doing a bunch of things, but it kept on coming back into my head. And in the meantime, I was searching for what to do with my life, like any 18, 19-year-old. What am I going to do for a job, career, everything else? And it took me a few years, but I eventually realized, like, look, I want to do something that's unique and creative that I can personally enjoy, but that also helps other people in some way. And then I kept on thinking about capoeira, and then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, I realized, well, that's it. I could do that. No one's ever done that before. I mean, I know people have been teaching capoeira for many generations, but like for an American kid like me, to become a capoeira teacher and make a career out of it and all that had never been done back then. This was 1989 and 1990. So then I moved down to the Bay Area in California, the San Francisco Bay Area, and started taking classes. And being a young guy, I bounced around a little bit, but got more and more serious about it over the next few years. And then, the fever took hold, like it does with a lot of us, and I just became a capoeira fanatic. And it just, consumed my life. Everything was about training and learning and playing capoeira, and I was training with Mestre Accordion, and then Mestre and Mestre Accordion joined together and taught together, which was great for me and my contemporaries back then because they're so complementary to each other. So I fast forward a few years. After training for 10 years, I graduated from their academy, and within a few months moved to where I live now, Sacramento, California, and opened my own school. And so there's a lot of things that happened since then. That was 23 years ago, but I'm still doing it. The doors are still open, still teaching every week, and I'm really happy that my dream came true. That was my dream, was to make that career a reality, that make that dream of a career a reality. And as you know, Mestre, it's not an easy path, especially if you're trying to make your living and all that. But I've been fortunate that it's happened, and part of it had to do with just being so determined and dedicated and never giving up. But it also had to do with a lot of great people helping me, great students, benefactors, people who believed in my vision. So nowadays, I'm still doing it. I'm still teaching every week at my studio. I have people to help me, but I still teach a lot of classes myself, including little kids, big kids, adults. I do it all. We have a Batizado every year, and the academy's still here in Sacramento. We've moved around a few spots, but we have a nice little spot now. And yeah, it's going really well. As you know, my wife and I had a child 2 years ago now, so it's been nice that I could step away from the academy a little bit. I'm still there every week, but I'm down to like sort of like part time so that I could be with the baby, take care of the baby, and so it's great. It's worked out really well, and I really feel lucky about that.
Fantastic. So just to people know, Mestre Galego and I are actually the same age, 1971. And is that right?
That's right.
1971.
Yeah.
So I think he looks fantastic for his age. Hopefully I do too.
You do.
And It's interesting. One thing that you'd mentioned about benefits, because we had talked over the internet several times about how sometimes you're able to get grants from the government or local communities. And one thing that I've always had to explain to my community here, nothing like that exists in Japan. It doesn't, like, everything I've done here, my wife and I have done, and thanks to my best friend, he's helped a lot. And I don't think I could have survived if it wasn't for creating my own community here. Just like when you get a grant from let's say the state of California Arts Commission, then that doesn't exist here in Japan. And that's why one of the amazing things about this whole Patreon, a little bit of commercial for Patreon, is it supports what I do. So a lot of the people who are contributing to my Patreon are people who are like, we understand that. And instead of donating to save the whales, which is not a bad thing, they're donating to help me do what I do. So I'm very lucky. One thing you had mentioned that I thought was really interesting. So are you saying that when you started Capoeira seriously about 1920, you were already thinking, oh, this would be a possible future career?
In 1990, I believe you meant to say. It's a long time ago, but I think it was like it wasn't in my mind to have a career as a teacher right away. Probably it took 2 or 3 years for that sort of to percolate in my mind and form as an actual goal. But I think from the very beginning, I had some kind of inkling, like somehow this is my path. Somehow one way or the other, this is going to be a central part of my path.
Would you say that was your path of capoeira? We're
That's
just
safe to
plugging
say.
our books today. We're just plugging our books today. No, it's interesting because like Tokyo is a major metropolis and has a lot of dance teachers who want to live and do. And it's actually incredibly challenging to live as an artist in Japan. Most of the old school like dance teachers are people who do many other things and they're not able to do capoeira as their main thing. And it's a process, like you said, and I think we're both very lucky and very fortunate to be doing what we do. So when you decided to start, like, okay, I'm gonna do capoeira as a career, did you, for example, did you start to say, okay, then I need to go talk to Mestre and say, okay, I want to teach in the future. What's part of it? Or did you just kind of know already and you just kind of started, I don't know, collecting information, learning beating bow, practicing more on singing, other things that you do?
I would say it's more the latter, the second description. At least at first, because I never really told a lot of people about my idea in those early days because I didn't really think anyone would take it seriously, and I didn't really want to broadcast it until I had something to show, until I put in the work to 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 get the education and have the qualifications. Um, so I kind of kept it to myself for a long time while I like you said, like got the training, collected the information, learning the music, everything that goes into it. I started going to Brazil in 1993 and learning Portuguese. Um, you know, being a Caucasian American and setting out to be a capoeira teacher, I totally understand that a lot of people are going to be skeptical of me. I don't blame them. It's natural because I'm such an alien to that culture. It's an adopted culture for me. So I knew I had to get very well qualified. So I just focused on training, learning. I was in class all the time, but even outside of class, I would study Portuguese. And Portuguese is was a big thing for me because I felt like if I set out to become a teacher on my own, like you are, like I am, if I don't speak Portuguese, some people are not going to take me seriously, and I don't blame them because I can't speak the language of the art. So that was a big goal that I pursued, like outside of class. Yeah, and the music, everything. So it wasn't until like the late 90s, like 97, 98, that I started to talk with Mestre Accordion, Mestre Ha about it and get their, tell them what my plans were and get their advice and everything. Um, I remember in 1999 they brought me into their office and told me they wanted to graduate me in 99. And I said, thank you. I appreciate the honor, but can we wait a year? I want to go to Brazil again so that I can refine my Portuguese, learn more music, everything, learn how to dance samba, just everything that all the surrounding stuff too. And then so that's what we did. Then they waited a year and they graduated me in the year 2000.
And when you mean graduate, you mean like formado cordon?
Yeah, like a
Okay,
formal.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
So for us here in Tokyo, that would be a blue cordon in Zulador. So it's a process of graduation, which basically means you've completed your education and now put it into practice. So
exactly.
when recently I've been talking about, I put up a podcast that'll be coming out soon, and it'll be talking about when is it okay to leave your group? And without getting too crazy, because a lot of times I feel I get it since I wrote The Path of Capoeira, and I'm sure since you wrote Playing in the Light, many people have contacted you that out of the blue. I've got people contact me from Germany, from England, from Argentina, and say, like I have these issues with my group, with my masters, and I'm thinking of leaving. And they're always asking, when is it okay to leave? And I'll give my opinion about that much later because I got that for my own podcast on a different episode. But I'm going to be asking all the instructors here when I do an interview is because I know also you used to be part of UCA, but now you're your own group. And without, I mean, not it's not about gossip, but I mean, I would like to know what were some of the reasons you left. What do you think you could have done better to build better relationships, right? Because a lot of times young capoeiristas, and when I mean young capoeiristas, I'm not talking about age, I'm talking about their time in capoeira. So for you and me, I mean, we've got 30 plus years of capoeira, so I don't think anyone would call us young unless they're like really old, but we have professional capoeira experience for a long time. So you separated your group. Is there anything you'd like to share about that so people can learn from it? Because a lot of the people who ask me, a lot of people still feel trapped in their groups.
Oh wow, that's a big question, and I'll say that I still, and always will have a lot of love and respect for my teachers, Mestre Accordion, Mestre Han. I still talk about them the same way as I always have in my classes. Like I learned this from him and that from so and so forth. I always give them props and everything. It was more a matter of just being working within that organization and being a part of all the meetings and the protocols and everything. So my lineage is still my lineage, and they haven't disowned me, and I haven't disowned them or anything like that. But I was with I was with that group for around 30 years, and for most of that time, I never thought I was gonna leave the group or do anything else. But over the years, I guess the main reasons that I felt uncomfortable working within the group were just some sort of like group dynamics that were sort of dominating too much of the activities going on, and some of the ways that people were getting promoted was kind of inconsistent, and there was a lot of little things, and it was cumulative. Like over the course of 30 years, it sort of built up, and slowly it's kind of like, I mean, it's really similar to like a breakup or a divorce, and it's like slowly over time we grew apart.
Yeah.
And it took so many years but it really kind of it happened. And it got to the point where I was just feeling frustrated and resentful and not really having a healthy attitude and not having a helpful attitude either. I was arguing with people and this and that. So I just realized that the masters are great. The UCA is full of wonderful people. I still love the people. I still have a lot of great friendships. I'm a good person. Everyone's a good person, but we just have some different philosophies, and we grew in different directions, and it became got to the point where the relationship was a little bit toxic, and it doesn't reflect on me or them. It's more just the relationship and the group dynamics that can occur. So it was hard. It was hard to decide to do that. Um, I took time to really deliberate over it and consult with people that are close to me. And then I talked with the messages about it, and that was hard. But in the end, we agreed that we're still friends, but we're just not going to work together in that capacity.
It's good to I ask these questions because generally the people who follow me and people who support and do uh, like listen and ask questions are basically non-Brazilians. But it's funny because over the last year, yeah, I want to say year and a half, while we were still in the pandemic, a lot of my Brazilian master friends, a lot of them quit their groups. And then with the whole, we had the big scandal with Cordon de Oro, which I'm not going to talk about because I have no capacity to talk about it. But everybody who's in Capoeira kind of knows what happened. There was a lot of strange stuff going on, and I'm not going to underplay it or overplay it. But a lot of people there was a lot of toxicity in a lot of groups, and a lot of Brazilian friends also quit their big groups or their groups because they were just tired of it. And I felt that Corona or the COVID kind of gave everybody a reflective point. And do you think that also affected you? Did that help in the process, or it was already building up?
For me, I think it was coincidental. I don't think that had much to do with it, but I know what you're talking about. And what I do relate to about that is that throughout this whole process, for me personally, I've come to realize that I'm not a big fan of the big giant capoeira group thing. I feel like Mestre Cordion, my teacher, he kind of agrees with me on this, even though he's the leader of a group. The UCA is not a huge group, and he always, throughout all the years that we were developing UCA, he always had a little bit of resistance to the development of the UCA, because I think he has the same sentiment that having a huge group is a little bit it's a little bit contrary to the history and the philosophy of that's in capoeira. That's part of capoeira. So I mean, you could argue for and against them, and I'm not necessarily trying to get into that, but except to say that I personally also have come to think that maybe big groups aren't the greatest thing for capoeira in a lot of ways.
I think I agree with you 100% in that aspect because, like, even now that we have Capoeira Zoador growing a little bit, it took 30 years. And I don't know if I could handle more than, I feel this way. I can get away from my academia, if I'm lucky, once a month for 3 to 4 days maximum. But that means I can do 12 events a year. So I'm not really interested in having more than 10, 11 people under me because it is time consuming, right? And the hardest thing for me in Tokyo is like San Francisco or New York. It's incredibly expensive. I can't travel. And for example, when like Mestre Boagente is like a godfather for me in capoeira. And when he travels from Bahia, wherever he goes, the money's always really good for him because of the value of the money in Brazil and outside. But for me to close for 3 days, it's like you close for 3 days. It's actually really expensive, and people don't understand that. And because I'm coming from Tokyo to other places like Thailand, I mean, I couldn't charge anything if I went. I'd be lucky if I could get the transportation and food and everything. But Contra Mexico is doing a fantastic job, so I love going. But like you, I understand there's a lot of things going on when you make a group, and there's a lot of things you have to weigh in, and a lot of responsibility with that. I loved your book, Playing in the Light, guys. It's on Amazon. You can pick it up. Why did you write the book?
I wrote the book because my story is worth telling and worth reading about. I felt, and I had lived such an extraordinary life up to that point that I felt like I had to get it down on paper, I never had ambitions of becoming a bestseller or anything like that. I really just wanted to have it for my students, my family, my friends. Hopefully some capoeiristas out there will read it. Um, but I felt like if since you read my book, like the path that led me to capoeira, some of those early adventures I had were really extraordinary, in Egypt and Israel and Mexico. And that was all just a big adventure, a quest really that led me to capoeira. And then the quest became learning capoeira to start that career. So it was just such a unique and unusual journey that I've had. And I wanted people to be able to access it and learn about it if they wanted to. And I also felt there's an entertainment value. There's it's just some fun, exciting episodes, and I felt like also like a lot of people could relate to it. I hope, and some people like you who have lived some grand adventures, like moving to Tokyo to, I mean, what you're doing is, if possible, even more extreme than what I'm doing. I mean, you're teaching capoeira. Okay, you got to tell it yourself, but you're like a non-Brazilian teaching capoeira in Japan. Okay, I mean that's like three or four different cultures all in a crazy mixing pot that you're putting out there. So I knew you could relate to my adventure, but I feel like a lot of people can. People who have had crazy adventures like that, and even maybe some people who would like to, who never did but would like to. So the adventures, the journey, the realization of a goal, those were all just things that I wanted to get across to the readers that I felt were worth telling.
When you look back on your capoeira career of over 30 years, what what would you have told your younger self to be aware of? Like how to avoid some of the toxicity that's in capoeira and what to better prepare yourself? Like what would you have done different in protecting yourself from toxicity? And what would you have done different to better prepare yourself?
Mm, I feel like wait, to answer your question, I feel like that's one thing I did a pretty good job on, was protecting myself from what you're calling the toxicity in capoeira. And this is a big subject, but in my opinion, there's, with all the beauty that Brazilian culture has and capoeira has, there is a little bit of a dark side, and it that's putting it too strong. It's not a dark side. It's just there's a what happened in my view was the Brazilian culture coming to North America. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is it taught us, like in my generation, so many great things. One of the things I loved learning about when I was a youngster and a beginner was how the Brazilian culture taught respect for elders and teachers in a way that I felt was lacking here in the United States. And I appreciated that. But it seemed to me over the years that that whole dynamic somehow became a little bit exaggerated, or out of whack somehow with Americans and the Brazilians. And this, again, this is just my opinion, but something to do with like um, the North Americans really wanted to put the Brazilian teachers on a pedestal. And like people wanted to like almost like regard them as gurus or superstars. And some of the Brazilian teachers encouraged that, and it all went too far. And but I never bought into that. I was always my view was always like, look, respect is one thing, and I'm all about respecting people for their accomplishments, for their knowledge, for their skills. But that's not the same as hero worship, or some kind of reverence as if they're religious figures or something like that. So I never bought into that kind of mentality. And I think that saved me a lot of pain, because I saw a lot of my peers, North Americans, they got too into that kind of thinking where, oh, the mestres are like deities or something, and then some, not all, but some unscrupulous teachers would take advantage of that, and it would go back and forth. And I think that in my view, that was the root of some of the things that got out of whack, and then some of the things that happened with Me Too and everything. part of it had to do with that. But I never felt that way. I always resisted that. And I told people like, look, you guys are taking it too far. These guys are great, they're amazing, but they're not gods, they're just
Yeah.
people. We're all
Yeah.
people. We're all equal. We're all equal. It doesn't matter. Even if they're mestres, not mestres, in the end, we're equal. So respect, yes, but hero worship, not so much.
Cultish devotion.
Yeah, I didn't want to use the
It's
C
this
word,
that,
but
no, no,
but
I like I said here, this is, it's a smaller community, but it's made for people to learn, because when I teach a lot of little kids, and nothing makes me happier than when I see them years later. Like, I'll run into a kid that I taught 20 years ago, and he'll jump and hug me like a loving uncle or father, and I'm blessed with that. So I always try to be honest with what I can do. Look, good and bad, honest. I will take you to one more, because it's been a fantastic interview.
hold on, Master. I'm
Right?
sorry to interrupt, but before we leave that subject, I just wanted to ask,
Go ahead.
do you kind of agree with what I'm saying about that, or do you see what I'm saying, or what do you think?
Okay, I tell people simple. Look, I'm Mexican American. I grew up on the border of San Diego, and in my last podcast, I was talking about how crazy it was when I went to Brazil the first time. I just thought they were like my cousins from Mexico acting ghetto. I was never impressed or thought like Brazilians are super cool, this and that. They were to me just more country and more lower education, and more not in a bad way, because I was uneducated. I hadn't started college yet or anything, but I wasn't impressed. There was no, for me, because I was a native Spanish speaker, I was able to pick up the language pretty fast, and I've always had a knack for languages. And I like this whole hero worship thing for me was just weird.
Right?
And as from a different generation like you, especially when it's like a heterosexual man to another heterosexual, I'm just like, oh my God, masters. And I'm like, wow. Like, it's too teeny bopperish for me. But I mean, I've told people, and I'm just not into it. Never was. What I will ask you, so a lot of people who will eventually hear this want to know what advice would you give someone who's starting out to teach capoeira?
With the idea that they want to make a career out of it,
Like somebody, let's say somebody says like, oh, I wanna teach capoeira as a possible career.
Yeah. One of the things that I would tell people is that consistency is so important. You have to show up. You have to always show up when you say you're going to be there. I see people trying to start off classes and they cancel class a lot and stuff like that. Like, no, you can't do that. If you say you're going to have class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever, you have to have class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you don't, people are not going to take you seriously. Or they're going to come and you won't be there, and they're not going to come back, and that sort of thing. So you have to build your group or your clientele or whatever by being very consistent, very, very professional. Like what you said a few minutes ago. Another thing is what I think you mentioned a couple of minutes ago was like, and this is what I tell my instructors when they're learning how to instruct. Don't feel like you have to know everything. Nobody knows everything. If you don't know something, just admit that you don't know it and say, hey, I don't really know that. Let's go find out together or whatever, because sometimes if you're a young teacher and you're starting out and someone, you kind of want to be like, you know it all, and you don't. So you might be tempted to be like, oh, blah, 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 and act like you know everything, but you don't. So just be humble and say, hey, I don't necessarily know everything. Here's what I do know. And so consistency, professionality, humbleness, those are some of the traits that I feel are really important to get something like this going.
That's fantastic. Okay. I'm gonna fade out here only because it's been a great interview and I'm trying to keep the podcast. I'm definitely gonna have to have you back with us in the future, because there's a couple of things like if you were to write another book, what would you focus on? If you were, I want to ask you about how you run your classes, and there's so many things I still want to ask, but we'll save that for a future podcast, because I just want to say thank you so much for being my first guest on Mestre Vibes podcast. I don't know how profound this will go to people, but I think it's important that we share. And like I said, you know, I put it out there and no one can take from me because I did what I did, right? I mean, I put the work in. I always tell people, you know, I'm blessed to have everything I have, but like you, I mean, we built it. So, would you like to say anything before we sign off here?
I'd just like to say thank you, and it's really been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit, Mestre. Hopefully someday we can meet in person, but we've developed a little bit of a friendship over the past few years, just online and so forth. So it's been really nice, and I appreciate all your work, and it's been an honor to be here with you.
Thank you very much. Guys, Mestre Sucuri and Mestre Galego book is Playing in the Light. It's on Amazon. Pick it up. It's a fantastic read. I have the hardcover. And it's just been a pleasure. And we're going to keep doing stuff so that we can help everybody grow in capoeira in a positive way. Mestre Galego, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mestre. Take care, everyone.
You guys have a great night. And if you guys need anything, you know, just get on Patreon and just hit me up.